name is Elizabeth Mans, and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the April 7th edition of the show of 2025, I should probably say that. Our mission statement is we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against the tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship their jobs overseas. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration, but as is our custom, we put the emphasis on Article 23. Dick.
Section 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment.
Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for herself or himself and his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection.
Mike?
Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Today we're going to be doing a special hour-long edition of the show as we have two very special guests with us. Maynard Cedar and his wife Sheila are being zoomed in from, are you back in Philadelphia, Maynard?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is also a joint show with the Solutions Rising.
We're going to present the April 4th Coalition program today that we're taping as a Solutions Rising presents the April 4th Coalition. And what a joy it is to welcome Rabbi Sheila Weinberg and Professor Emeritus from MCLA, Maynard Cedar. The two of you, it's so exciting to be doing this program with you.
Well, thank you very much. It's always good to be back in North Adams one way or another. But the truth is, I think I invited myself talking to Dick, but we're glad you accepted the invitation.
There's an open invitation.
Oh, okay, so do we lose?
Would you like us to start, Dick?
Yes,
Yes.
please do.
Okay, great.
We're so happy to be here with you all and share about our trip, our recent trip in February to Israel, Palestine, and let you know something about the Combatants for Peace, because that will be coming up again and again. Here's a picture of some of the staff of the Combatants for Peace. Now, who are the Combatants for Peace? Well, in 2006, Israelis and Palestinians who had once faced each other as sworn enemies actually laid down their weapons and joined forces to co-resist the occupation and create Combatants for Peace, which is amazing. We were very inspired. Our first time we met them was in 2018. Maynard and I were on a trip to Israel, Palestine, and we met some of them, many of them, and we saw their work and their goals and the power that it takes to change from being an enemy to actually someone that you could be a co-worker with. Very moving. They do work on the ground, supporting communities impacted by violence stemming from the occupation. They do education and empowerment, different kinds of work to empower the next generation of activists, something called the Freedom Schools. We'll talk more about that. And they build community beyond borders. They do something called the Joint Memorial, which is coming up April 29th, and the Nakba ceremonies. And the Joint Memorial is people who have lost a beloved family, either Israelis or Palestinians, come together to do the mourning process and to do the memorial process. Very moving. And they do advocacy and international awareness. So when we came back in 2018, Maynard and I started a group, the Philly chapter of the American Friends of Combatants for Peace. We went back again with some of our members in 2022, October, and then we were just there again in February. This is the group that we were with in February, some of us from Philly and also people from other towns, some of the staff of the American Friends. There were Jews and Christians, there were a few rabbis, there was a minister, there was a law professor, and two lobbyists actually in Washington, D.C. We stayed in East Jerusalem and in Bethlehem. And this is the trip that we're going to share with you today, where we went.
So this is, you probably recognize photos, or maybe you've been there. This is at the Dome of the Rock. And this is the oldest extant Islamic structure in the world. And we started off by being at this particular area near the Al-Aqsa Mosque. On the far left is Emily. Emily is Palestinian, she's a Christian, and she was our Palestinian guide. And next to her is Yael, who's our Israeli Jewish guide. And we were on a dual narrative trip that for as much as we were able to, is to have two guides, one Israeli Jewish and one Palestinian, because there's more than one narrative. Actually, there's more than two narratives, but if we had enough room in the bus for all the narratives, we probably need a huge bus. Anyway, so there Emily is giving us a little bit of history of this particular area. This is the market in the old city of Jerusalem. And what's unusual about this photo is there's hardly anyone there. You see some of the stores are shuttered, only several people there. Normally, this would be very, very crowded. This is the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, and normally this would be very crowded also. We've been there in the past where there are huge lines, also for the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, lines bumper to bumper inside. But now, because there's virtually no tourism because of the war, everything is very open. I mean, that's sort of one of the benefits of it, but the drawback is the economy is in terrible, terrible shape. The poverty rate in Bethlehem and also the unemployment rate hovers around 70–75%.
This is what they call the wall. This is at Bethlehem. It was, the Israelis put up this wall, this separation wall after what they call the Second Intifada. And there's art on it. Artists were invited to come, and now it's more like graffiti, but there's still some artwork. There was a hotel here, the Bansky Hotel, which was closed since October 7th, a few days afterwards. You see, make hummus, not walls. And you can get the idea. There were people begging around there because of the hunger and the lack of employment, the lack of money. And this is the West Bank. And this is Rachel is weeping because Rachel, the mother of Joseph and the wife of Jacob, she's buried separately in Bethlehem. The other patriarchs, matriarchs in the Hebrew Bible are buried in Hebron, but she was buried in Bethlehem. And they say Rachel is weeping. It says that she is weeping for her children. She is weeping for her children indeed. In Bethlehem, we went to visit a really remarkable guy by the name of Zugbi, and he's a beautiful man. He spoke to us. He's Palestinian. He has an organization called the Palestinian Conflict Transformation Center, and he said this is the worst time in history. It's his viewpoint. He has an American wife who's not allowed to live with him because of all the complications of crossing borders. And he says it's also the most important moment to offer hope and dedication to nonviolence, justice, and peace. And he believes in collective responsibility, not pacifism, but unarmed struggle. And he said, never again is for everyone. And we are not pseudo-human beings. We are all human beings. That was the message again and again that came through. And this is one of the two of the people on our trip. One is a photographer and has a Palestinian background. The one on the right, the other one on the left, works for the American Friends of Combatants for Peace.
One evening, we went to have dinner at the family home of a man called Aziz Abu Sarah, and he was one of the co-founders of a tourism group called Mejdi, and that's the one that really started this dual narrative tour. Aziz wasn't there, but his brother Mustafa was there, and over the years they've helped to make a living by inviting tour groups into their home for dinners and for entertainment. As it turned out, because of the war, We were the first group to get there since October 2023. So it was about 14 or 15 months. We were the first paying group to go there. Aziz and Mustafa, when they were much younger, their older brother was killed by the Israeli army. And they've since gone through a number of processes and now work entirely for peace. Aziz has partnered up with a man named Maoz Inan, who lost both parents, Israeli, on October 7th in a kibbutz right across the border from Gaza. And the two of them have teamed up going around the world doing TED Talks about the importance of peace work. And they actually met the Pope earlier this spring. So this is a short video showing our dinner with Mustafa.
Okay. I got a video. Oh.
We were at another Palestinian home later on, and the person there did exactly the same flip. So that must be, I assume with two examples of two, as a sociologist, I would say that's probably a trend or something that goes on in the society. This is still back at the house of Mustafa, and this is a musician named Marwan Zayaka, and wonderful, wonderful musician playing what I think is an oud. And we've seen him in the past, a couple of our past trips. He said, again, because of the tourism, he hadn't picked up his instrument in over a year. It's funny, when we go on these trips, people will sometimes think of it as a vacation. It's hardly a vacation, it's very serious, it's very intense, but sometimes when people will say, did you have fun? Well, at this particular night, we did have fun. We did a lot of dancing, some are better at it than others. But it was a lot of fun. Later on, we traveled to Beit Jala, also on the West Bank, which is the office, the Palestinian office of Combatants for Peace. They also have an office in Tel Aviv, in Tel Aviv. But this was the Palestinian office, and we were there to hear two of the original founders of Combatants for Peace, Suleiman Khatib, we just call him Suli, and Avner Wishnitzer, an Israeli, to hear really their stories. This is what the room looked like. That's Suli on the left and Avner on the right. Suli spoke first and told us of his fairly typical early teenage years, throwing stones and Molotov cocktails at Israeli tanks. When Avner began, he stressed that he, like Suli, grew up in a culture of nationalism and militarism, and like Suli, he was raised to serve. Avner did serve in an elite IDF unit for 4 years, where the weapons of killing had the legal imprimatur of a powerful state. Suli did not, and when he and a friend attacked 2 Israelis with a knife, he, at the age of 14, ended up in prison with a sentence of 10 years. This is a book that Suli, in collaboration with Penina Eilberg-Schwartz, wrote about his journey. The experience in prison proved difficult, but Suli soon learned the power of organization and discipline. He took part in 2 hunger strikes, one for 16 days and the other for 17 days, in order to improve their conditions, and they were successful. He subsisted on just water and salt. The goals were to improve the prisoners' conditions, and as he put it, quote, the battle of the stomach was successful. He decided to learn Hebrew and Jewish history, including the history of the Holocaust, wanting to understand the other side. He already knew the practice of sulha, an Arab tradition of stopping a conflict and through mediation, moving to reconciliation. As he put it, while the prison had jailed his body, his soul was free. When he left prison, he became committed to nonviolence and to learning more about Jewish Israeli social activists. When he and his other comrades heard about former IDF soldiers refusing to serve in the West Bank in 2004, they contacted them. Avner was among that group. He had always been curious, even skeptical, of the policy of the occupation, and in 2002, while still a reserve soldier, started going to the West Bank with a small group of activists. Quote, "What I saw, especially in the southern Hebron Hills, which was the main theater for us, shook me. He saw poor people being taken from their homes by the IDF, and he watched settlers violently attack unarmed Palestinians. He saw a system, a whole regime of oppression. At first, Avner felt, quote, deeply ashamed, as that system speaks in my name. Gradually, he felt he couldn't be part of that system, and in 2004, as mentioned earlier, he, along with a number of other reservists in his same, quote, elite unit, wrote a public letter that they would refuse to serve in the occupied territories. Then Avner and the others began to look for what's next. They wanted to effectively resist the system they criticized. It was at that point that they agreed to meet with Suli and his Palestinian friends. The meeting led to the start of the Combatants for Peace. They went around the circle, Jews and Palestinians, each sharing their stories. Avner remarked that even though the differences between them were many, quote, one thing that we did share is that we were raised to kill people we didn't know, but no more. After a few meetings, we realized, quote, we can change and struggle nonviolently against the system that we all agreed is ruinous, not just for Palestinians, but for Israelis as well.
Yeah, it was very moving, as you can imagine. Then we traveled by bus to the Gaza border, and that's on the other side. You're looking at Gaza, basically. We were in a town, an Israeli town called Sderot, which is right on the border, and was attacked, and October 7th. But they're also used to being attacked. This is a bomb shelter, masquerading or double functioning as a playground for children. We also visited a kibbutz Re'im, which is also very close to the border, and we met this lovely man named Ramzi, who is actually part Bedouin, part Druze, part Arab, married to an Israeli, and living on this kibbutz with his children. And his son was among several, they were attacked by Hamas on October 7th, and his son, who was 18 at the time, was kidnapped along with 4 other young people. There were also 7 killed on the kibbutz, and other police and army. But Ramzi, they all evacuated the kibbutz, and he came back eventually. His son came back after 54 days, being a hostage. And Ramzi took us around. We spent several hours with him. We were the first people that he had actually told his story to, how powerful and sad and deep it was. And then we went right next door to the Nova Festival site. Well, let me just say another word about the kibbutz. This is a bomb shelter. They're all over the place. It takes like 15 seconds to get into a bomb shelter. They give you 15 seconds to move. And this was something that really touched us. The kids, when they get to be bar mitzvah age, 13 years old, they get to decorate their own bomb shelter. So this was his son, Liam, the one that was kidnapped, and this was his bomb shelter, painted by his group of 13-year-olds. Pretty sad. So then we went to the Nova Festival, which was right in this field of anemone, and then they put these artificial anemone up there, as these are the real ones that were blooming at the time. And there were 350 young people who were killed, and this is the memorial. It's very, very well attended, shall we say, by the Israelis. Very powerful. There's a memorial for each of the people, and they tell their story. It's very, very difficult and very painful. At night, we came back and we met Fatima, who's there, and she's being translated. She's this was our only foray really into Israel that day, and now we're back in Bethlehem with Fatima, who is a Gazan, and she told us a very powerful story. She was an activist, an anti-Hamas activist in Gaza. And we're reading now that there's protests in Gaza. You know, there's this idea that everybody's a Hamas. Well, that's not true. She was an anti-Hamas activist in Gaza, but she was apprehended and needed to flee, and she fled to the West Bank where she lives and is working for Combatants for Peace. And many of her relatives have been killed. In fact, she just told us it was very heartbreaking. Her mother was just hit by a drone and killed shortly, a few months before we met her. And she had an amazing story. She has 2 young children. After there, we were back on the West Bank, and we were in a place called Al-Chwani, which is famous now. It's in an area called Masafer Yatta. It's famous for the film that won the Oscar, No Other Land, which was filmed in Masafer Yatta. And we were there in 22, and in 22 we met Basil, the filmmaker, but now we met Abigail, whose sister was one of the other producers of the film, No Other Land. Huh? Directors, one of the directors. And that man is Basil's father. And this is a picture of Basil. And this is a place on the West Bank, again, in the Hebron Hills, that has been consistently attacked by settlers, not protected by the Israeli army. This is ongoing. Israel claims that this is a firing zone and that they can't live there. So home after home is demolished.
If I could just add one thing. One of the things that the combatants and other peace groups and, peace-loving Israeli activists do is they will go out and spend some time at villages like that, going out with the shepherds, thinking that maybe if the settlers see an Israeli there, they're less likely to attack the inhabitants of that area. I mean, that's one of the things that the combatants and other peace groups do, along with trying to get water and stop home demolitions in those areas.
And this is a picture of Basil, the filmmaker's mother, and Abigail. Abigail, who also works for Combatants for Peace, and on her day off comes out to do this protection work.
Translation.
And translates, because she's fluent in Arabic, and that's one of Basil's sisters. But the mother told us her story about how there was no school, and how the only way they could build a school was the women worked during the day, and then the men worked at night. They did it undercover and with tremendous odds, and they ultimately built a school, which she's very proud of.
The trip took us way over to Jericho, and just at the edge of Jericho, that's actually the Jordan River. So you can see how narrow the Jordan River is. There's the Israeli side and the Jordanian side, and if they wanted to, and maybe someday they will, they could almost shake hands across the river. When I was in college, there was a very popular song, Michael Row the Boat Ashore, and it said, "The Jordan River is deep and wide, hallelujah." Well, it doesn't seem to be very wide. I'm not sure it's very deep, but that is the very famous Jordan River from the sea to the river. We were at a place that was sort of a Christian site, and you could see here Christian pilgrims dressed in white, I think about to be baptized in the Jordan River. while we were there, we had a presentation by a young Palestinian combatant, a young man named Tariq. And Tariq not only gave us the history of sort of the geopolitics of the Jordan River in the area, but he also gave us a history of the distribution of water, or I should say the maldistribution of water. It's a really, really difficult, tough subject in that particular area. This is what the Israelis call Area C. That comes from the Oslo Agreement, and it's a huge area of the West Bank that is totally under Israel control. Anything that the Palestinians want to do, a permit or whatever, they have to get permission from Israel, which they very rarely do not get. And the water is under the control of the Israelis, and the Palestinians might get 1 liter of water for 20 or 22 liters that settlers will get. And as you drive around the area, what you'll see are these gorgeous settlements, you know, that look like American suburbs with swimming pools and a lot of greenery. And then you'll get to a Palestinian settlement and you'll see the real need, the real difficulty of getting water for themselves. And also, a lot of them are Bedouins, and also for their sheep and goat flocks.
Our next stop was a place called Al-Auja, and this was another place where there was a lot of activism, regular activism. The man standing with the jeans and the shirt was our guide, Ahmed. He lives in Jericho. He grew up in Jericho, but his family is from Gaza. And he told us at that point that, this is hard to believe, but he said 141 members of his family were killed since October 7th in Gaza. It's kind of unbelievable. He had a very large family and lots of connections, and yet he's still involved. He was in one of the more, I think he was at Hamas at a certain point.
He was young.
When he was young, but he also came to the conclusion after prison and some time that violence was not the pathway. So he's been an activist in Combatants for Peace, and he's remained after October 7th. There was some of the Israelis left, some of the Palestinians left, but the movement has actually grown since October 7th. And these are the men sitting there who are the local Bedouins, and they have the sheep herds. And then there's Ahmed, really nice picture of him. Very, very lovely man. And this is a man who's Ro'i, his name is Ro'i Kleitman, and he works for the Combatants as the Israel Community Outreach and Education Director. He's an Israeli. And the project is the freedom schools are young people, and these are the young people that many of them have been connected to the freedom school, who come up to these places where there are frequent attacks, as Maynard was saying before, by settlers, and burning and stealing of the sheep and destroying the homes. And these young people connected to the freedom school come up and they sleep over. You can see they're sleeping over. And these in particular, and the man we showed earlier, Ro'i, is a new program called the Freedom School for the Faithful. So there are religious kids who are brought up as religious, as in a Jewish religion, and who many of whom are, even some of whom grew up in settlements, religious settlements, who realize that they don't want their religion, their Judaism, to be part of this level of oppression. They want it to be to defend the other. And it's kind of an amazing process. There is a whole movement in Israel called the Faithful Left. So it was very moving to meet these people, as you could well imagine.
Yeah, and it happened that day 2 of them had been arrested earlier while out with the shepherds. On our last day, typically on the last day of a combatant's tour, you do volunteer work. So in our two previous tours, One, I think it was in November, so it was after the olive harvest, we worked on building a playground in the West Bank. And our second one was in October, so then we did some olive picking. It was during the harvest. This time in February, what we did is we planted olive trees. I'm holding a pick. The verb I think of when you're holding a pick is wielding a pick. I can tell you I did not wield a pick, but I at least held it and did a little bit of digging with it. And I'm not that good with languages. Before this trip, I knew one word in Arabic, and that's salam, for peace. But I learned another word on this particular trip, and that's samud, spell it S-U-M-U-D. And it basically means steadfastness. Steadfastness. And I understand from reading about it, it's a very important word in Palestinian culture, that they've been steadfast in clinging to the land despite, huge odds and violence that is focused in on them. And the land is so important to them. And the picture that comes to mind that I've read about with Samud is a picture of an old Palestinian woman on the ground with her arms around a huge old olive tree, trying to protect it from an incoming Israeli bulldozer. So that word samud has just really stayed with me. And so, we're on this hilltop. We know we can be seen by soldiers and settlers. And there at the very end, as we're leaving, as if they're continuing a film, three soldiers showed up who, whether the settlers told them that they were planting trees, or the soldiers saw it, or they just wanted to make us uncomfortable, they came, and we checked a few days later, the olive saplings were still there, olive tree saplings were still there, and we hope that's still the case. I mean, it's an amazing symbol for the Palestinians, and for the settlers, it means, we could stop the harvest, we could dig up the trees, and we could stop, it's their livelihood, the olive oil that's made from those trees. So that was our last day there. And we thought we would end by just sharing some resources with you. There's the website for Combatants for Peace, the website for American Friends of Combatants for Peace. And Sheila, maybe you could tell them a little bit about Standing Together.
Yes, one of our stops, we met a wonderful person from an organization called Standing Together, which is made up, again, of Israelis and Palestinians, but in this time they're citizens of Israel. So it's not like the combatants, which are include the territories in the occupation area. They're just citizens of Israel who work together, which is amazing, and they've grown enormously. They have branches actually in the U.S. supporting them, working together to lead, to help, to support each other, and to support the possibility of peace. And then we also met somebody from Breaking the Silence, which is a group of Israeli soldiers that have served in the Israeli army, the Israel Defense Force, although the Palestinians don't call it that. They don't believe it's defense. And they are, after they come out, after a period of time, they record their experiences breaking the silence and what they've seen. And they also do programs in various cities. They do, and particularly we were in Hebron, but they have all kinds of projects trying to wake the population up to what's going on and to look for alternatives that are nonviolent. There are two films, well, there are three films. We mentioned No Other Land, and that was when you can see it. It's been difficult to see.
It was in Great Barrington, actually.
Was it? It's the one that won the Oscar, and it was a joint project of Israelis and Palestinians. And then the Combatants for Peace have two films, one Disturbing the Peace, which was an early film, which you can get online, and was really wonderful description of the origins of Combatants for Peace. And then the same director went back to Israel and Palestine after October 7th, just this past few months ago, and made a film called There Is Another Land, which is in various places around. It's actually going to be on.
It's going to be available online.
It's going to be available online for a few days in April, but very worthwhile, very powerful, very moving, to give you a deeper idea if you're interested.
I would just say one last thing about breaking the silence, because I've thought, as certainly many have, how is this thing going to end? How is the carnage in Gaza going to end, the West Bank, and so on? And I'm wondering how many young soldiers, they're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, that have taken part in what goes on in Gaza. Are they going to ultimately break the silence and say, we don't want to do this anymore? And is that one way of stopping the carnage when there are no more soldiers or very few soldiers willing to go back? I've talked to people about it, and they think it'll probably take time. You may have read there have been suicides, a lot of PTSD about soldiers who have served there, reservists, older Israelis who are refusing to go back. So, that's one area where maybe some change will come about, because it doesn't seem like with the Israeli government and the U.S. government that ending is going to happen soon.
I think I'll just stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could see us or if you want to see us. Stop
We can
sharing.
see you, Maynard.
We can see you. Can
You
you
can?
see us?
You can, you can, okay,
yeah,
I can
great.
see you folks
Yeah,
also.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot, and give you a chance to ask us or just to say what's on your minds about the situation as it's called, or some of the slides that you've seen.
Well, Rachel, did you-
I would, this is astounding, and I think we're going to, at least I'm going to try to get it out as many places as I can. What the two of you have done in Combatants of Peace is so important. And, when I saw Rachel is weeping, this Rachel is weeping too, at what is happening in Rafah, at Gaza. I really want to be hopeful that it's going to end, but Gaza is nearly destroyed, and hunger as a weapon of war, the humanitarian help that is not getting in there is horrific. And I remember being in the Middle East. I lived there in Libya for 2 years and did a Middle East tour in October of 1966. It was in Jerusalem, and one day I'll show you these pictures. And just the places you were talking about, and the streets that you said are absolutely bare, how lively and how vibrant they were, and to be in Jerusalem and that whole area and see it now. It is heartbreaking, heart-wrenching. This is horrific. But anything any of us can do, and particularly Combatants in Peace, and the resources you have provided today are astonishing and so necessary. And I just am so grateful that you have brought this program so that we could be part of it. And I do know a little Arabic, so I'll say Shalom Aleichem and Salam Aleichem in Hebrew and in Arabic, and the other Arabic word is Alhamdulillah, praise God, and I think probably I need to learn that in Hebrew. But I also, one last thing, is that people in the United States, most people, need to separate combatants from peace and the atrocities on October 7th and the atrocities in Gaza and in Palestine. You need to know the history, because it's so much easier for somebody to say, if you speak up, you're an anti-Semite, and this just isn't true. I would like to know about your own safety. I think it's just absolutely amazing that you were able to go there, and how did you do that?
Well, thank you so much. Really, it's so important to us to be received. So we're very appreciative. Well, we were with a group, and we had American passports. It was not always that simple to get into, get by the El Al and the security at the airport, but we managed to get through. And what we didn't say is that it's incredibly difficult to get from any place to any place on the West Bank if you are a Palestinian. There are innumerable roadblocks, and the roadblocks keep changing and opening and closing, and you don't know that you're going to get anywhere. And it could take hours and hours and hours, and you have to forget about getting an ambulance or anything like that. Now, we, as Americans, we were stopped quite a few times by Israeli soldiers, and then we brought out our American passports and we floated those up, and they let us go. Now, were we afraid? Were we, I didn't have any fear. We just felt that if you're gonna go, you can't think about that. We happened to be there during the ceasefire, that short-lived 2-month time ceasefire, although while we were there, it almost ended. And in fact, one of the people that came on our trip, one of the Washington lobbyists who had been sent by his organization called Women Without War, they wanted him to come back because they were afraid he was going to be there during when the ceasefire ended. But we managed to make it through the entire trip. And I don't think, there's just so much grief and pain for what's going on that we didn't feel fear. We felt it was a privilege to go and to witness. And the people that we saw were really grateful that we were there. They were so grateful to be seen and to be witnessed that it felt like an honor and a privilege for us.
I should say, though, that within our group of 18 who went, one of the men who works for the National Friends Legislation Committee in Washington, D.C., his father is Jordanian, his name is Hassan, and they questioned him for several hours. And there also was a woman who's got a Palestinian background who also got questioned for quite a bit of time. Whereas those of us who didn't have, quote, the wrong names or the wrong religion or whatever, were able to get through quite easily. So it really depended on, I think, on religion, ethnicity, in terms of how you were treated in Israel when you were trying to go through or when you were trying to leave. When we were there in 2022, there was violence going on up north, and we were going to pick olives up north, but the combatants and their comrades know the situation well enough. They just didn't send us up north. They just sent us to a safe place in the south. And I think this current time, they also were monitoring the situation. We were originally going to go in September, but that didn't work out, so that's why we ended up in February.
They canceled the September trip for us.
Right. So
I had
I didn't feel that we were in danger at all during that time because we went with this group two previous times, and they knew how to take really good care of us.
So I had a question. Again, thank you so much. I live a very sheltered life here in North Adams, so you're exposing me. You encouraged me to go see that movie, No Other Land, and I was able to go see that. But when you said that you had 2 sets of tour guides, one Palestinian and one Israeli, it reminded me of a statement that Ta-Nehisi Coates made on Democracy Now! When he was there. There were certain places, like he had a tourist guide that was Palestinian, and the Palestinian would say, you can go there, but I can't go there. I'm going to wait here. You can go there. I just wondered, were there places where the Palestinian guide couldn't go when you were on tour?
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely correct. The Palestinian guide did not come to Sderot, did not come to the Nova Festival site. The Palestinian guide did not, could not. And it's really complicated. The Palestinian guide is from Bethlehem. She's married to an Israeli Palestinian, an Israeli Arab, who is a citizen of Israel.
And a doctor in an Israeli hospital.
Right, and she they couldn't live together for like a couple of years. They weren't allowed to live together. The same thing with Zugbi. The control of movement is so extreme for the Palestinians. No, you're absolutely right. And for the Israelis, they don't want to come to the West Bank, shall we say. They don't even think you can. We had a person on our trip who's from Philadelphia, and her wife lives in Tel Aviv. It's kind of a long-distance relationship, but they go back and forth. Any rate, they have a lot of friends. After our trip, she was in Tel Aviv with her friends, Israeli friends, and they could not believe that she was in Bethlehem. You were in Bethlehem? You stayed in Bethlehem? How could you do that? We don't believe it. And they don't see each other. It's unbelievable. The Israelis do not see what's going on exactly. The press is very controlled. Now it's a little more. They see a little bit more, but at the beginning it was incredibly controlled to not see.
If I can go back to that Tallahassee Coates interview on Democracy Now!, one thing, when he did go and the IDF questioned him, one of the questions they asked him is, what religion are you? And he said, I don't have a religion. And they wouldn't accept that answer. So they said, well, what is your father's religion? Well, he didn't have a religion too. Well, what is your grandfather's religion? And so he said, yeah, my grandfather was a Christian. So that sort of got him to be able to go through, but it was very pointed. Were those some of the questions that you would get?
Well, I mean, I remember one of my first trips to Israel. This is way before Combatants for Peace. Sheila, this was the Israelis at the airport. I guess they knew you were a rabbi. So they asked me, do you know your Aleph Bet, which is like your ABC? And I think they were asking me, do I speak Hebrew? But I thought they wanted me to repeat the alphabet. So I started going Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud, and I couldn't get past Yud. I never was able to get past Yud, even when I was 13 years old, I don't think. So they do want to know that, or they'll ask you, if they see a group of you, what synagogue are you from? Because, I mean, again, we were somewhat unusual tourists. Most of the tourists who come to Israel come there, through Jewish establishment organizations. They do solidarity tours, with Israelis because of October 7th. And, and then there probably the great bulk of the tourists are Christian Zionists who go as well. And they're also very welcome in Israel, even though the end result of them being there is for the apocalypse and the Jews, going up in flames unless they convert to Christianity. It's a strange kind of system.
But we were there, two of the people on our trip were Jews by choice, people who had converted to Judaism. And we were just going through the lines with them, and they were asked a lot more questions than we were.
Yeah, for whatever reason, Sheila and I maybe look more Jewish than they did. And they were asked questions like, well, what's your favorite holiday? What's your favorite Jewish holiday? Which I was never asked. So yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of training that goes on there that the security people are dealing with. But if your name is Hassan, it's worse.
Yeah.
I have a question about when you had that meal that you enjoyed so much, and the man flipped the contents of the bowl over. To me, it reminded me of my father, because we had polenta every Sunday, and that's what we would do with the polenta. So was that cornmeal? Was that cornmeal that was in that
It
dish?
was rice.
It was rice.
It was
Rice,
rice.
okay.
Oh, so your dad could do that also?
Right.
Well, he would do it
Rice,
with the
vegetables,
polenta. He would
and-
make the
and
polenta,
chicken.
and they would flip it onto a breadboard the same way.
Okay, so it's not just a Palestinian custom.
No.
And
Okay.
then,
No, it's great. They take great pride in getting it down perfectly.
It was yummy.
in
Food was
Jerusalem.
great. Food was great.
Yeah.
In Jerusalem, staying at the Jerusalem Hotel, we had a dish, if I remember correctly, called mansa. with goat's milk on it, and you had to pick it up with your hand and squeeze. Squeeze it and then eat it like this, but it was a big dish that everybody reached in. It was a wonderful celebration, and this is just so stunning what you're doing, and so awesome and so incredible. And this program that you're bringing today is so very important.
Well, it's going to open a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
You know, the more it gets out, they're gonna see people being people, which is probably what gets lost in translation, is that everyone is a person and a human being, and there's more in common than you think. And everybody, you know, the tradition, you know, the food, the eating, the sharing, the community, all of that is there. And it's so important for people from a distance to realize that, because it's also getting lost in the United States.
I was just thinking that, Liz, that we're watching the people in the United States also being categorized and separated, divide and conquer, and I mean, how many different divisions can you have when we're all human beings and trying to survive? This is another
Yeah.
horror show going on right here.
That's why we have that sign.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Poverty is the enemy.
It's not any nationality, it's you
It's
know,
the common
hunger in people that are homeless.
And that's what the Universal Declaration is about. This is universal. Something will happen, something will give. And of course, a lot of prayers.
Well,
No matter
I
what
wanted-
you believe, must be a lot of prayers.
I wanted to ask them about the question of that group called Breaking the Silence. Because I live a very sheltered life here in North Adams, but I listen to podcasts, and Ralph Nader has a radio hour, and he had a Colonel Wilkerson, who used to be an aide to Colin Powell. And in his show, he said that the IDF is suffering badly, that people don't know how badly this war is inflicting wounds on the IDF. And I was just wondering if you got any of that while you were there on that trip.
Well, I would ask people, in fact, I asked the fellow that we met who was a representative of Breaking the Silence, if more and more soldiers who served in Gaza were, quote, breaking the silence. And he thought it takes a while. But to get to Wilkerson's point, I mean, the population of Israel isn't that great, and they certainly haven't suffered like the Gazans have suffered, not even close. But a lot of soldiers have died proportionately for the, you know, for the state of Israel, and have been wounded. And then there's, you know, PTSD and all the rest. And I've read, I think, in Haaretz that the reservists, a lot of reservists are telling their company they're not going back, whether it's because of fear, whether it's because of the economy, or whether it's because of family, you know, probably all of those reasons together. So again, trying to think of how is this thing going to end, and given U.S. policy, unless it changes, and I don't think Netanyahu is going to change his policy very soon.
He's
I
in
mean, the two
Washington
are-
right now.
Are interlocked. Yeah, I was wondering, given what Wilkerson is saying, will there be a shortage of soldiers able and willing to go back, and will that ultimately be the end of it?
I was really happy that you highlighted the woman who was a fighter against Hamas, that you showed her in this program, that she was
Yeah.
very much against Hamas, and that is a really important point. You just can't say all Palestinians are part of Hamas. And, you know, they're saying 50, 60, 70,000 people killed in Gaza. I think it's far more than that. We have no idea.
And I,
No,
I just wanted to say that one of the very moving experiences that you could also find is the Joint Memorial. It's going to be this April 29th at 1:30 on Eastern Time. And if you go to the one of the websites that we put up, the Combatants for Peace or the American Friends of the Combatants for Peace, you can just sign on to download it and view it. So you're viewing it live. It's a big project for them to organize that, as you can imagine, and not everybody gets to be in the same exact place. But it's talk about actually validating the humanity and the loss and the grief on both sides, even though it's, you know,
Yeah.
the Israelis have so much more power in that sense. You can't say that, you have to acknowledge the power differential, but the grief is there, and it's something you can actually see. It's happening in a few weeks.
What
April
is that
29th.
again? Sheila, what is the name of that again?
Well, it's called the Joint Memorial, but you
Oh,
can
okay.
find it on the Combatants for Peace website. You
Okay.
can find the connection to it.
It's right around the time that the Israelis historically have had their own Memorial Day. So the Combatants for Peace and another group a family group got together.
Bereaved families.
Bereaved families got together and say, why don't we also have a Memorial Day, but we will bring both peoples in, rather than just one people. And it's incredibly moving. There's one guy, his name is, Eli, who goes out with the shepherds a couple of days of the week. He drives from Tel Aviv to one of the Bedouin villages. He lived in the US and Canada for many years, went back to Israel. And after he saw the first Memorial Day he ever saw, he decided to become a combatant. It was just so.
Combatant for Peace.
Combatant for Peace, right.
It's been a combatant.
Better
It was
add
just
that,
so- it
yes.
was just so
Slight
moving.
difference.
So, yeah, I highly recommend it.
Well, you know, you said that, you recommended that no other land, and I went and saw that in Great Barrington. But Rachel, did you say that it's coming
I
to
think it's going
Images?
to be at Images on May 7th at 7:30 at night
It would-
Now,
Well, that's great.
in
wow,
Williamstown.
that's,
Yeah.
So we'll encourage people to go see that.
If people want to
Yeah.
join Combatants for Peace, may they do that online? Or
yes,
how-
if they want to,
Become a member?
well, they don't so much have members, but you can get on the mailing list, and then you can get all their materials and the webinars and all of that. I would go to American Friends of Combatants for Peace.
Oh,
Of course,
okay.
they're always looking for donations, like everybody
Of
else.
course.
But you can be on the mailing list of American Friends for Combatants for Peace, and then you can find out what's going on, which is great.
Thank you for that. Okay. This is just amazing, awesome.
We're so grateful to have you with us.
Thank you so very much. Rabbi Sheila Weinberg and Professor Dr. Maynard Cedar. We are so grateful to
I
both
just
of
like,
you.
I just like being back in North Adams.
Now, what is that word again? Is it shamud? Is for steadfastness?
Sumud, S-U-M-U-D. Sumud, S-U-M-U-D.
Because that's a
May-
term that Gandhi used a lot too.
At the very end of the film, No Other Land, when they're giving the acknowledgements, they acknowledge the people in that area for their steadfastness.
Sumud.
Sumud.
We all need it.
Yeah,
We
we
all
all
need
need
it
it in
in
this
these times.
country too.
Gandhi was a big, that was an important word for Gandhi too, steadfastness.
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
hate to say it, but we're running out of time. So Maynard and
Power.
Sheila, thank you for joining us. Power to the people.
May you be
Power
blessed.
to the people.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Peace.
Mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. In the cities and the farmlands, the trenches full of mud. War's always been the bosses' way, sir. The Union forever defending our rights. Down with the black leather workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters in many far off lands, there is power